But the number one reason that you have to have a follow-up process is because you don't have a what happens next process. How many of you would like to have customers for life? And then you don't have a what happens next process? One of the most practical applications of magic words in this entire body of work is what happens next. Who in this room gets buyer's remorse? Yep. And it often happens because we close the deal as done when it wasn't actually done. A simple label that can keep you in control of every relationship that matters in your life is that before you finish a conversation, you say what happens next. Instead, what we do is we do it, create ta-da moments, like ta-da, and then it all goes quiet, and then we have to follow up and try and restart a conversation and look to be able to get back on the same page. It's a process called waterproofing when done right. It's like, you see what I'm doing? All I'm doing is future pacing the journey of what's going to happen. As long as you want to keep a relationship with somebody, you need a what happens next statement, and then again and again and again. Who in this room loves to follow people up? Not many of us actually enjoy it. You might have learned to do it, but the number one reason that you have to have a follow-up process is because you don't have a what happens next process. If you had a what happens next process, you wouldn't need to have a follow-up process. A simple label that can keep you in control of every relationship that matters in your life is that before you finish a conversation, you say what happens next. And then all you do is you do it, and then you say what happens next. And then you do it, and then you say what happens next. And that is the rest of time. Instead, what we do is we do it, create ta-da moments, like ta-da, and then it all goes quiet, and then we have to follow up and try and restart a conversation and look to be able to get back on the same page. Let's look at this just from a customer point of view. How many of you would like to have customers for life? And then you don't have a what happens next process? Like, I think the listing, the closing table of a real estate transaction is the best example of this. It's like you put all this emphasis on the closing table, and then you let it go dark, and then you ignore them for 3 years, and then you're like, hi, remember me? And it's awkward to try and get back into a position of rapport. What difference would it make if you could say, so what happens next is that now that you're homeowners and then you got the keys, you're going to get back into the house, and instead of this being a hypothetical environment that you live in, this is going to be the home that you now live in. And what's going to happen next is you're going to start to realize that what you might need is some insights into somebody that can help with blank, or somebody that can help with blank, or somebody that can help support with blank. So what happens next is 10 days after you've walked in, then you're going to receive an outreach from us to help you understand how we can introduce you to some of those vendors that would be helpful. So what happens next is, between now and that 10-day window, why don't you take a way of keeping notes, whether that's on your phone or whether on a scratch pad, about anything that comes up that you think you might need insights for. And what happens next is, if you can't wait 10 days and you need some help faster than that, then know that you can always text me, call me, email me, etc. to give you those insights. And then what's going to happen next is that you're going to start to enjoy living here, and this house is going to become blank. And then what happens next is 12 months into the relationship, we're going to reach out and share with you some information about what's happened with the market so you can understand how your asset is performing. And then what happens next is, you see how long you need to go on this? All you've got to do is to stay ahead. You don't have to go to the finish line, you just need to stay ahead. And if you can be 2 to 3 moves ahead of everybody at every given point in time, then you simply just have to do what you say you're going to do, and then kick the can down the road a little further, and do what you say you're going to do, and then kick the can. Even in a buyer's consult to the realtors in the room, you take people out, show them 3 or 4 houses, don't get much feedback, and say, we'll speak at some point next week and find out what you thought, and you randomly try to connect with them and look for some feedback. Touch their base, yes. Wouldn't we be better to say at the end of a weekend of showings is, so what's going to happen next is you folks are going to go home, and likelihood over dinner or through the evening, you're going to think about what you've learned from your experience today, and what's going to happen next on our side is we're going to put our ear to the ground with any other new listings that are going to be coming up that could be of further interest to you. And then what's going to happen next is maybe Monday, Tuesday next week, we're going to reconnect in the conversation. You're going to share your lessons and we'll share what we find out. And then what's going to happen next is we're going to create a game plan about where do we go from here based on the new information. You see how applicable this is? As long as you want to keep a relationship with somebody, you need a what happens next statement, and then again and again and again. Vanessa, if you built what happens next steps into your relationships with your accountancy clients that you would like to have reaching up to your advisory service, could you find a more meaningful moment to be able to introduce ancillary services?
No, the moment that we are working on presenting the plan for what is going to happen at the end of our engagement.
Yes, because you're driving to a finish line. But what you could equally be doing is you could be saying, so what happens next is we're going to review your existing position, tidy up all your financial information so the challenges of your past are no longer the challenges of your reality. You can have greater insights, you're going to get up to date with the IRS, we're going to deal with blank and blank and blank and blank, and relief kicks in. And then what's going to happen next is once you have access to that kind of information, you're going to wonder what to do with it. And you're going to start asking yourself questions about how you can be a better financial planner inside your business. And what's going to happen next is you're going to be wondering what resource and help looks like from us at that given point in time. So what happens next is once we've got this all cleaned up is we're going to invite you into a conversation so you can understand how you can get even more value from our services and look to be able to use more of the strategic planning advice that we can provide. And then what's going to happen next is we're going to build a plan that's going to mean not only do you get this short-term mess cleaned up, but your long-term financial future is going to be in your control. And what happens next is you're going to end up paying us more money. And then what's going to happen next is you're going to end up paying the IRS less money. You see what I'm doing? All I'm doing is future pacing the journey of what's going to happen. If I'm in the business of selling worktops, isn't it the same? What happens next is, could we resolve the 3-week call of somebody calling you about a scratch with a what happens next series of statements? Could there be a what happens next is that you're going to get a call from somebody in our customer experience team to find out, and that happens 24 hours or 48 hours after they've installed, and then what's going to happen next is, and then what's going to happen next is somebody at some point is going to do something that's going to cause some damage to your work surface. And what's going to happen next is you're going to wonder what to do about it. So remember that what you did do is you purchased a natural product that is going to have natural characteristics. And just like other things inside your life, that you're going to learn to love the way that they've aged, the way that they have developed, the way that your story is now showing up inside the life of the product you purchased. And then what's going to happen next is this is going to go from being your new countertop to part of your home. And then what's going to happen next is as you use and beautify and XYZ with the product over time, you're going to start to ask yourself questions about how to clean it, how to care for it, how to look after it. And then what's going to happen next is, you see, you future pace all of this. Then when it happens, they're like, oh, that's what they said was going to happen. No big deal. One of the most practical applications of magic words in this entire body of work is what happens next. Who in this room gets buyer's remorse? Yep. And it often happens because we close the deal as done when it wasn't actually done. Patrick, I'm looking at you as somebody that was definitely going to come and join your team. You had the greatest meeting in the world, right? Thursday night over dinner, everything was awesome. They're bringing across their entire team to your brokerage. You go home that night crushing it. They go home that night, hit a completely different conversation. You go into the office the next morning. You tell everybody how great this is going to be, and you call your prospect to be able to follow through on the next steps, and it's like you're speaking to a completely different human being. It's a foreigner versus the person you left at dinner last night. And it's because they've had a very different what happens next experience. Instead, if you say, look, what happens next is that you're going to leave this conversation. Chances are you're going to go back into your normal life. You're going to get people share with you some thoughts like, are you sure? Is this definitely what it is that you're going to want to do? I mean, what about? And what happens next is when you go and speak to your existing brokerage, chances are they're going to be able to make you offers and present you with alternatives about what they could have and should have done for you in the past. And what happens next in that scenario, you're going to find yourself with a little bit torn about what it is that you're going to do next. So what needs to happen now is for you to think about what you're going to do when we know that happens. No, I'm all in. I know that's going to happen. So what happens next is I'm going to contact you tomorrow afternoon, and the next step from there is, you see how you can future pace anything? It's that if we fail to be able to do that and we think that something is complete before it's complete, we let it go colder and then we have to try and get it back again. Sure.
Before you say that what happens next, like, tell me why you decided
to
go back and reiterate why you decided to make this move.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process called waterproofing when done right. It's like, how do you waterproof a transaction after it's done? Get it closed, get it signed. I mentioned yesterday I did a lot of work in the furniture industry. We would do everything beautifully, but we would still have what happens next is that you're going to be asking questions about blank, blank, and blank. And when it gets to delivery, it's going to be blank, blank, and blank. And here's where we reiterate, it's a non-cancelable agreement. This goes directly towards production. You are booking space on the delivery, boom, 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 boom. When it gets delivered, it's a natural product. You are going to expect it to have some slight variations. And this, like, all of the bad news comes after the yes. But we're just getting them to be sure, like, they know what true looks like. Make sense?